I'm Sheila Guillotine, and this is the Simsbury Woman. Today I have some very special guests, 4 of them in fact. 2 are human and 2 are canine, and we're going to be talking about therapy dogs. Most people are familiar with service dogs. These amazing animals work to assist us with as guide dogs to the blind, search and rescue dogs, and even dogs that are trained to sniff out dangerous medical conditions. Few of us have walked through a large airport recently without noticing the comforting presence of the canine bomb unit. But today we're talking about something completely different. Today we're talking about therapy dogs. The first thing to note about a therapy dog and a service dog is that they are different. And although some service dogs are therapy dogs are usually not service dogs. Why does that matter? Well, for several reasons. First, unlike a service animal, therapy dogs are not covered under the protections of the Americans with Disability Act. Unlike service animals, therapy dogs and their handlers must be invited into a location. Second, the purpose that the therapy dog serves is to not assist with a task, but to give comfort, support, and affection. Today we're going to focus on one very important part of the therapy dog, supporting and encouraging children who must suffer from anxiety, loneliness, or fear of new situations. School children in today's world are subjected to high levels of stress. That stress can come from any number of sources, but the end result is always the same. A child is afraid to speak in public, afraid to speak up for themselves, afraid to tell something they're afraid of because of the crushing fear of criticism or even bullying. Our guests today have a great deal of experience in this area. They have committed themselves to helping children from the very young to even high school students to conquer these fears, and in doing so to become strong and confident. Perhaps the best known example of the kind of therapy, and the one we'll concentrate on today, is the children reading to dogs. I'd like to introduce my guests, Karyn Cordner and her dog Raven, who are both Simsbury residents, and Sally King and her dog James. And welcome all 4 of you.
Thank you, Sheila.
Karyn, you and Raven are Simsbury residents, so let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you did before, and how you came to be a therapy dog handler.
I'd be glad to, and it's been a wonderful trail to follow. I was a banker for 30 years. I finished my career after many changes and wonderful job assignments at Bank of America. I retired as a senior vice president. I retired a little bit early. I was 50 years old when I decided I wanted to make a change. And I've always loved animals. I have a daughter who's a veterinarian, so I was interested in veterinary medicine. And I went back to school for 2 years to become a certified veterinary technician. And I did work directly as a technician, but with my business background, I also had a couple of fun assignments. I was the manager of the Newington district at the Connecticut Humane Society for a number of years, and I also managed an emergency veterinary hospital. So I really had a chance to get involved with the dogs, and those were wonderful changes. Some of them became part-time. It kind of took me 10 years to retire. And when I was in my early 60s, and I still am in my 60s, Sally was kind enough to introduce me to the idea of therapy dogs. And so she brought me into a wonderful world of joy and help and fun. And we're so glad to be here today to tell you a little bit about that. But I guess basically it was a 15-year path from the time I decided not to be a banker anymore and got involved with dogs. And every day when we're going to meet people and be with the dogs, wonderful things happen. I hope we'll have a chance to tell you a few stories.
Well, we're looking forward to that. I understand that Raven herself has a very interesting story about how she came to be a therapy dog. Could you tell us a little about her path?
I'd be glad to. It makes me one of the luckiest people on the planet. One of the places I did work as I was sort of motoring through my retirement was at the Fidelco Guide Dog Foundation. I ran their volunteer program for a couple of years. And all of us who work there are amazed at the intelligence and devotion of these dogs, and Raven was born there and bred to be a guide dog, and it takes 2 years to create a guide dog. So from the time they're 8 weeks old, when they leave the neonatal unit, they go home with the family, and when they're about a year and a half old, they come in for their formal training. That takes 6 to 9 months. So Raven is moving along just fine on the path to be a guide dog, comes on in, and she starts working with the trainers, and about 3 months into her training, they noticed that she was a little bit too friendly.
Okay.
She wanted, instead of working to lead her guide person, she'd want to go over and meet you. She'd want to go over and meet Sally. So they determined that her attention span was something that would be better applied to something like what she's doing now. So at Fidelco, if a dog goes on to a different job than a guide dog, they call it being re-careered.
Okay.
So Raven was re-careered.
Just like us.
And I was fortunate to be able to bring her into my family as a pet. But what's very important for these dogs that are bred to be guide dogs is they have to have a job. So it was very exciting that Sally said, well, let's do therapy dogs. She had already been doing it. So Raven went to school. Maybe we can tell you a little bit about what that means. And now she has a job, in my opinion, of changing people's lives.
Okay.
And it's very rewarding.
Sally, I know James is getting a little warm under these hot lights, and I'm sorry about that, James, but we will try and move this along for you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came into the therapy dog world?
Sure. I'm a resident of Granby. I've been there since 1984. I'm a lawyer. I practiced with a big firm in Hartford for 15 years, and I'm also a horseback rider. And I also, like Karyn, had a change in my career at a certain point. And I've done, at that point, I ended up doing a lot of nonprofit work. So I was chairman of the board for the Village for Families and Children, which has the Second Chance store right here in Simsbury. And then I got involved in my local government, and I'm on my board of selectmen in Granby. And I rode horses a lot, and from the horses always come the dogs. And from that, I got interested in Australian shepherds and the sport of agility, which is, if people don't know about it, is we guide the dogs through courses without any leashes or anything other than our verbal and our physical cues. And it's lots of fun, and it's grown amazingly. But through that, I got very involved in dog sports and in dogs. And from there, I went to, when I got this dog, and this is James, and his registered name is Absolute Crown Royal, and he is an Australian Shepherd registered with the AKC and with our breed registry. And he is a breed champion, and he has agility titles. And in the course of doing my agility classes, I met a woman named Tibby Chase, who's from Massachusetts, who teaches a lot of dog classes. And she said, you know, because he would be doing agility, but he was always much more interested in going to visit with the people. So she said, you know, he would make a very good therapy dog. And she said, I teach a class for a therapy dog organization, and you should consider doing that. And I said, well, that sounds like an excellent idea. So that's how we got to Bright Spot, which is, we're both certified by Bright Spot Therapy Dogs, which is a Massachusetts organization. So the classes were up in Massachusetts, and we took those, and he got certified, and we started doing the therapy work, and it's been absolutely amazing, and that's why I got Karyn into it, because the effect that they have is truly remarkable.
Okay, I think a lot of people think if you just have a nice, friendly dog, that's probably all you need to have. I know the training can be very rigorous, not only for the handler, but for the dog. And so one of you give us a little something about exactly what goes into training you as the handler and the dog to function as a therapy dog.
We had different people for our classes. My class, we had 3 2-hour sessions. Well, the very first session, they weed out a lot of handlers because, as you say, people think, well, I have a friendly dog, so that should be enough. No, it's the team. You need the dog and the person to be in sync, and you need the dog to be obedient and responsive to the person. So that's the first thing. And they also have to be able to absorb different situations, odd things, walkers, wheelchairs, machines that go boom because you're going in a hospital. Mm-hmm. You're going to have beeps. You're going to have all kinds of stuff. They have to go in an elevator. They have to be able to just maneuver. They have to back up. They have to be able to approach people from different places, and then also have to be, when you're doing work with children. We had the children into our class, and We had sessions where we read to smaller children that are kind of climbing on you and the dog, and then also with teenagers. And so they expose us to as much as they can to make a determination that the dog is going to be sound out there in the therapy world. And then the last class for us was an evaluation in a nursing home, where we went in and they actually got to see all of us.
Okay.
And then on top of that, there was an evaluation with Bright Spot.
Okay, and then there's also an evaluation, I assume, of the handler.
Yes.
Oh, sure. Well,
And
that's
you
always
have
the
to-
team.
right.
Absolutely.
Now, you always talk about a team. Why is that so critical?
Well, it was kind of eye-opening for me when they talked to us about that, but it makes perfect sense. When we go in, my primary job is to make sure that Raven is appropriate in the situation and safe. So that's the interaction with whoever we're visiting. But also it's my job to keep her safe. For instance, if we were in a hospital, there could be medication on the floor. Somebody might have dropped a needle. Or, as Sally said, equipment could go by that's noisy with big wheels and might bump her. So it's my job to present her as an appropriate therapy dog, but to keep her safe. And I think Sally alluded to this. This can't go on for a long time because the handler and the dogs, we get tired.
Sure.
It's exciting, but also emotional to connect with people. And the last thing that they told us to think about was to pick an organization that was right for us. Not everyone, Raven, sit, might be comfortable in a memory unit. Not everyone might be comfortable in a hospital. Somebody might love being with children. So they asked us to think about what situations are we going to be the happiest in. Our dogs are so intuitive that they are going to be the happiest and most effective in those situations as well.
Okay. I noticed, for instance, we talked about some schools invite you in, some don't. What happens if you run into someone, or do you pre-screen someone who might be afraid of dogs or allergic to dogs? Ahead of time?
You want to talk about the one
that's-
child
yeah,
in the
it's
school we go in?
Well,
we have a situation like that, and the school handles
okay, well,
it.
tell us about it.
I think one of the programs that cropped up earliest for therapy dogs were the reading programs, where they discovered, and there's statistical evidence, that if children have some issues with reading, if they read to the dog, a non-judgmental, furry beast, it helps them a lot. So they started those programs, but then, of course, with all things, you got people saying, oh, but my little Johnny is allergic, so we can't possibly have the dogs in the schools. So there was a point where they weren't coming into the schools. And then I had an incident in my town where they had, in the high school, an untimely death of a senior right at the beginning of the school year. And it was very upsetting to the whole community. And so they scrambled around, and they really wanted a therapy dog to come in. And it ended up through somebody in New London that I knew, who knew my dog was certified, said, it's right here in your town. So I ended up going in with my dog into the high school, and I'm thinking, this is going to be interesting. You're thinking high school kids, what are they really, dogs are, come on now, we're 16 or 17. And I went in, and the response to him was absolutely amazing. We started the day in a meeting with all the administrators to see what was going to happen for the day. And he was just like this. He was sitting with me. And so you had them all going, oh, wow, well, look at the dog is well behaved and he's quiet. And then when we went out in the halls, just the response was absolutely amazing. So that kind of led to a whole bunch of things happening within that school system that then led to us with the elementary kids and more reading programs, and the idea, that they can do the reading programs, which are that's pretty straightforward, where they read to them, but that they're also a huge aid in any kind of guidance issues or any kind of, as you said in your introduction, other issues where the dog is just something that's helps a lot, and it makes a tremendous impression and effect on the child and how they're functioning in the school system.
Okay. And to your question about how does a school manage if there's a child who can't or shouldn't be around a dog. One of our elementary schools has a child like that, and the principal just plans the timing such that things are separated if that's what's necessary.
Okay.
So everyone can be accommodated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you've told me some stories about some things that Raven has done or some of the people she's worked with. Please tell our viewers some of those stories.
Well, there's one that just still amazes me, and it's in the elementary school where Sally opened the door. And each of us come in once a week and spend an hour there. And I have children who come in, sometimes one at a time, two at a time, for 20 minutes, and then it shifts. And one day I had a little third grader, and he had been reading to Raven for weeks, and so he's a charming kid. My job is to sit in the corner and be kind of quiet, just set her up. So Raven would be on the floor like this, and let's call him Joey. Joey comes over, he brings a book, they start reading. And I'm sitting in the corner just waiting, and he's reading it. All of a sudden I heard him snap the book shut, and so my head popped up. He had his face right up to Raven like this, and he said, Raven, I've never told anybody this before, but another kid's been bullying me, and I don't know what to do about it. Well, Joey had an aide, so she was brilliant. She said, Joey, why don't you tell Raven more about it? So he told some things that were very difficult for anybody, much less a child, to put up with. And because of that, I think the parents through the school were able to know about this for the first time. The school was able to get the proper resources, and he was holding it in. But there is something about being with a dog who's close, and as you said, a kind of a furry thing. He did it, and I think she made a huge difference in his life by just being there, and he trusted her. Right, Raven? Good girl. So yeah, that was a really big one for me.
Yes, I'm sure. Sally, you, I'm sure, have equally touching stories.
We had a very interesting thing happen. When I did my evaluation, it was at the Holyoke Soldiers Home. And
James, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's Raven.
Oh, that's Raven.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good girl. Yeah, she's going to stay right next to Jim.
Yeah.
So we did the evaluation, and we go through the various floors, and there's various units in the soldiers' home. And after about 30 or 40 minutes with the evaluator, she said, "You've passed already. Everything's fine, but I want to take you over to the dementia unit," she said, "because I think your dog would be really good in there, and there's someone I want you to see." So we said, okay. So we went with her in there, and she brought us over to a woman who was there, who was basically not speaking and not, just was kind of very blank. And we brought James over to see her, and she reached out, and she petted him, and she smiled, and she spoke, which was just huge, because she hadn't done that. So, I mean, the response that we get to these guys can be just amazing. And we also do a reading program in Holyoke, in the Holyoke Mass Public Schools, where the kids read to us. And to and from, we can frequently run into groups of kids that are with their teachers. You know, they'd be, 10 or 12 third graders, 12-year-olds or whatever, and they see the dog, and they get all excited, and they will, as many people that do have dogs know, they will run to the dog, and everybody's going, oh no, they're going to, and they all coming at him, and they've got their hands on his head, and he just loves that. That's the best thing in the world to him.
Oh, that's
He
great.
thinks that's just really exciting.
Because that's what you're usually told not to do.
Exactly.
When you go near a strange dog.
Put your hand over there, and he just thinks it's great, and they can surround him and all be petting him at once, and he's happy.
Do we have time for one more child story?
Absolutely.
So one of my children, I think the reason he comes is that he's learning to write, and it's not the easiest thing for him. And several weeks he came with a story, and I could kind of see over his shoulder that it needed a little bit of work. He had lots of ideas in his head, but his challenge was writing it down. And one day he came in and he said, Raven, I decided to write about you this week. And apparently it was the best, most cogent story that he had written. Something about the connection with her made him want to really think about his sentence structure or his grammar or whatever his work's challenges were. And so, I consider her an editor of books as well. It's really something what they can do without saying a word, just through that eye connection and hugging. There's a lot of hugging that's going on.
And as you can see, they also get along extremely well together. So we
Apparently.
we put them in. I have a huge crate in the back of my car, and we put them in together, and they go off to anywhere. Come here, Jimmy. Come on, Jimmy. I know. Is she crowding you?
James is a little warm under the lights.
Yeah, come here,
as
buddy.
you can see, he's a very furry dog.
Yes.
Come here, Ray.
So
Come here.
we're
Sit down.
sorry that he's
okay.
not comfortable.
Sit down.
He's okay.
But he's a
Raven,
good dog.
sit. There he is. He's over here. Down.
We were going to
Thank you.
talk
Stay.
primarily about children. Now, where do you mostly deal with the children? The reading to children programs are in several different places, I assume.
Yeah.
You mentioned to me that you even got a call from the Hartford Public Library.
I did. They had heard about it. That's something we would look forward to. Yeah. But I'd love you to tell about the high school and the football players. Or do you want me to tell about that?
Yeah, that was that day that I was in the high school. They were just, you're saying, these kids are going to be.
What we were doing was we were there during exams, so they would have a break and they could come through the library.
Oh, that too. That
There's
one
so many
too.
stories.
Yeah, they invited us back after we did that. They have now, it's very popular. Yale Law School started it. It's called Exam Relief. So they bring the therapy dogs in, in an exam break so that the students can relax and unwind and pet the dogs. So I've done that at Bay Path up in Longmeadow. And then the high school started doing it. So the Granby High School asked us to come in there. So we go in the media center with these dogs, with the two of them, and the response to the kids is just amazing. And it's not just the girls. I mean, it's the big, tough football players that'll come in and see. And they know James. Even one day, too, we were at another school in town, and I was walking James into the elementary school, and a car went by. It was obviously high school students, and the window came down, and I heard, James! So they're pretty famous.
So what I noticed is the kids come in, and they're, they got their facades on and their egos, and it's rough and tumble, or the girls are in their little groups, and when they see the dogs, they just melt, and it's almost as if they become 8-year-olds again with joy. And of course the cell phones come out and they're snapping selfies with the dogs. And I really think that they get a few minutes of distraction from the stress of the tests.
Absolutely.
And I mean, maybe somebody should do a study someday and see if the grades go up when they have exam relief when the dogs are there. I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised
because
either.
as you know, your serotonin goes up, your heart rate goes down, you can think more clearly. I think the little boy who wrote a great story about Raven was thinking more clearly. Because he was focused on her, and I think he felt her appreciation for what he was doing. So I wouldn't be surprised if they get better grades.
The other thing, I had a child that I was working with that had a lot of issues, and we started out, and things went so much better, and better reading skills, and he was excited to see the dog. And at the end of the school year, unasked, he said to me, I said, we're going to be stopping pretty soon. And he goes, wow, are you going to come back next year? And am I going to be able to see James? And I said, oh, yes, we'll make sure that happens. So even from the little boy, it was a pretty amazing response.
Okay. Yeah. We were primarily talking about children, but you mentioned, and I think we should at least explore, you mentioned veterans. And as I understand it, the PTSD issue, which is huge, is also something that therapy dogs are particularly good at helping with.
I kept, again, Karyn will fill in the rest, I kept up with the Soldiers Home in Holyoke after I did that evaluation there. So there's a Bright Spot volunteers go one Saturday a month, a whole group of them, and go through. And so I told Karyn that she should come to that, because I thought, oh, this is a veterans hospital, all you hear about all of that, and you're thinking, I don't know, but it's a very joyful place, and there's a lot of volunteerism and a lot of really cool things going on. So I brought Karyn along with me, and we just had the best day. I mean, we're going to go back as soon as we can on that Saturday, because the response is just overwhelming.
The day I was there, I happened to be in a wing where there were female veterans, and one of the ladies, I think, was quite ill. And when I was directed to that room, I was told that she's not able to sit up or get up, and she's very quiet. So I went in, and there she was, and she seemed to be a little bit asleep. But I asked Raven to put her paws up. She knows how to put her paws up. So she had her paws on the edge of the bed, and I took her little paw, and I put it on the lady's hand like this, and she opened her eyes, and she smiled. And I was told, very sadly, that she was near passing away, and that may have been a moment of peace and joy, perhaps a memory of her own dog that helped her in that moment. I mean, the tears came to my eyes, and I really could tell that there was a connection. And then there are just a variety of different wonderful veterans, from some older guys from World War II, some Vietnam, Korean guys. Some of them are full of fun. There was one guy whose name was James, and when James came up, I want a picture with James, that kind of stuff. And then more quiet folks where you just come in and you just sit for a minute, and you thank him for the service, and Raven knows how to wave and thank you. And I'm telling you, I just feel that it just helps you breathe. So that was a real honor for me to be able to go and talk to some of those veterans.
And we'll go again.
We don't have a lot of time left, but just real quick, tell us a little bit about Bright Spot, because that's where you both
you do that. It's great.
trained.
Bright Spot was started by a woman named Cynthia Hinckley she's from West Hampton, Mass, I believe, and it's a nonprofit organization, and it's great because the therapy group, the organizations like that provide the evaluation services and the training, and then they also provide the networking for you. So they get volunteers that go out and find various places to volunteer, and then those are listed, and then of course also they provide liability insurance, which, as we all know, is important to everyone in this world. So when you're a certified volunteer with them, then you're also covered by their policy. And then you can also, you can add locations. So if you find, programs and work, you can get those registered with Bright Spot. So we've been doing that too with some of the stuff we've been doing.
And as I understand it, you have to be certified with an
Yes.
organization. You can't just decide yourself to go out and...
Well, you'd have the liability issue, obviously.
Right.
So that's
And you
huge.
might not be invited in.
Okay.
Right. So they know there's, yes, certification.
The dogs,
behind us.
any dog is eligible as long as it's 1 year old and properly healthy and certified by a vet. But then they have to, as you said, show that they have the discipline and the temperament. And in my class, one of the scariest things that happened to Raven was they put her in the middle of the room, they surrounded her with 10 strangers, and the strangers approached her as if it was a little bit of a threat to see what she would do. Wow. Many people would go, holy smokes, guys, what's going on? But she just
tried to
sat
lick
there
them all,
and
yeah.
bring
Yeah,
it
hi,
on.
guys, yeah.
And so
You
those
do
kinds
that
of things
too.
are what you prove.
Okay.
And then you go and you meet new people and feel good about your day.
Great. Well, unfortunately, our time is coming to an end, but we've only begun to explore the breadth of the things that therapy dogs provide. Today, we did focus mostly on children's issues, and especially the Read to Dog programs, which are a way to help improve literacy, as you mentioned before. But younger children are not the only ones, as you said, who are helped by this. Colleges and universities, you mentioned Yale, are learning very quickly that the use of therapy dogs is something that they can embrace. Unfortunately, the trend began probably during several of the tragic incidents that have occurred on campuses, but schools soon came to learn that the therapy dogs were very helpful during extra stress periods like exams, and it's even been noted that the students who use therapy dogs and pet them have actually said that they have less of an inclination to want to abuse alcohol. I would like to thank Sally, Raven, James, and Karyn, and invite them to come back where we can talk a little bit more about the different programs. James, we are going to let you get out of this heat. And I would like to thank all of our viewers for watching this today, and I hope you'll come back and watch the second half. Thank you, and have a great and joyful day.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.